Hey, it's Sarah Burke here from the Women in Media podcast. And before we get started on a new episode, could I get you to hit like, follow, subscribe, hit the bell, whichever app you do your podcast listening in. Make sure you're all set up so you know when there's a new episode and you can help spread the word. Oh, and if you're so inclined, could I ask you to leave a review if the app that you're using does that? You're the best. All right, let's get to the show. I'm Sarah Burke, the host of the Women in Media podcast. Without extending a formal invitation to today's guest until late this summer, she was on the doodle page in the early planning stages of this podcast. Someone at the top of my guest wish list. She's always been a big deal in the industry, and I will admit, I was always a little intimidated by her. Actually, let me rephrase that. I've been intimidated by her brilliance as a leader.
You know, that's when they said, maybe you should think about getting into programming. And that meant being someone's boss. And that was no way. No, thank you very much. I don't want to be anyone's boss. Because I really equated being someone's boss with having to be mean. And then when I realized that leading a team is wildly different from being someone's boss. Now it's about figuring out how you can help other people. And that's when the light bulb went off.
My guest today oversees the strategy and content for 56 radio stations, 2 podcast networks, 30 local television stations, and 15 television channels. You see what I'm saying? My guest today is Julie Adam, Senior Vice President of News and Entertainment at Rogers Sports and Media. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast.
Appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Now let me start here. From my early days in radio, mentors, colleagues, peers, Julie Adam is someone you need to know. What does that mean to you to be so highly regarded?
You know, I love this business so much, and I love people so much. And I still consider myself, the intern in the music department at Q107, I'm dating myself, CDs and, running out and getting lunch for people. And, so I will always be, feel humbled and truly grateful that if it all ended tomorrow in this business, it's been an incredible run. And if I've helped anybody, that's the best part for me.
When you were, working in the Q107 music department, did you actually have your eye on management back then? When did management actually become part of the career path?
I never wanted to be in management. I being someone's boss to me was the polar opposite of how I was wired and what I wanted to do and how I thought about things as a younger person. I really wanted to be in the creative side of things. I wanted to be a musician. That's what I wanted to be,
Did you play any instruments?
Terribly. Any instrument I touched, I played poorly. And this was really how all of this started is, my like many people in this business, I had 2 very deep passions in life, music and sports. And in my younger days, music was sort of everything for me. It was really a lifeline. It was the thing that grounded me and made me happy and helped me like any, teenager that has challenges. And when I was coming out of high school, I just wanted to get out of school. That was like my goal was just to, not have to go to school, not have to be told what to do for 8 hours a day and have to do stuff I didn't really want to do. And I'm not advocating people don't go to school, but I knew it was important to go to university. So I went to university, but I had no idea what I was going to take. And, I had realized at this point that I wasn't going to be a musician. I didn't have musical talent. And I'm not being humble. I really don't. You either have it or you don't. And I didn't have it.
Yeah.
But I wanted to see how could I be around music and work in music. And my older sister recommended Ryerson Radio and Television. I hadn't even thought about it. And so I went and did that at Ryerson. And then I thought, maybe I could be on the air because then I could just be around music and I could play all my favorite songs. And that seems like that would be great. And then I did that and I wasn't very good at that either. So, you're really learning that my career has been all about, just not succeeding at the things that I was wildly passionate about early.
How did you know that part wasn't going to work out? Like, what were the things that told you, this might not be for me?
Well, I had, I had I actually will always remember very clearly when I was working in Regina, and the general manager, Mike Zaplitny, had given me, or the program director, Tom Newton, both were amazing to me in my early days. I don't know, they'd given me some kind of project about putting a countdown show together. And it came really easily to me. I mean, I just sort of did it and passed it to them. And they said, wow, was that hard? And I said, no, I thought that was really easy to do. And so that's when they said, maybe you should think about getting into programming. And that meant being someone's boss. And that was, no way. I want to stay on the air. I want to do a morning show. I want to be in a room. No, I do not. No, thank you very much. I don't want to be anyone's boss. And because I really equated being someone's boss with having to be mean and hard on people and, kind of yell at people. And
I might have thought that in the beginning too. I hear what you're saying.
Right. It's sort of, I associated it with sort of power and, title, and I just didn't, none of that really it still doesn't interest me. But, they were gently sort of, and then I moved back to Toronto. I wanted to come back to Toronto. I really wanted to work in Toronto, and I'm from Toronto. And I wanted to work in a big, really big market, the biggest market I could work in Canada, and ended up getting moved to KISS when it was country. And, I stopped in Ottawa along the way, and I was just sort of gently, management was sort of saying you're just not going to cut it. When I was on the air doing overnights, I used to have an air check at the end of the day. I would go in and see the program director. Then I'd go on the air, and then she'd make me stick around so I could do another air check. It didn't connect for me. This notion of sitting in a room, talking to myself, it didn't connect with me. And now I can understand why. That's not who I am. I'm not a solo artist. I don't really want the spotlight. Not really. Yeah. I don't want the spotlight. I'm not good at it. I couldn't understand how to put all of those pieces together. And so I was kind of pushed into the programming side. And then when I realized that there was so much more to this, being part of a team, my love of sports and my love of playing sports, and, leading a team is wildly different from being someone's boss. It's a completely different thing. And then I started thinking, I really love this, because now it's about other people. Now it's about figuring out how you can help other people and how you can go, put a morning show together and then work with that team and help them be the best that they can be. And that's when the light bulb went off.
Oh, I totally understand that feeling. I love that. Can you remember a moment early in your career where it was quite difficult to, make the call on something? Because that also comes with being a boss, even though the team aspect's there.
I have so many. I'll tell you a couple of funny ones that are small, and then
okay.
we can talk about some of the bigger ones. So when Rogers bought 92.5, they purchased it in 1999 from Rolco. I had been working for Rolco I worked for them in Toronto, Ottawa, and Regina. And when Rogers bought the station, management left. Sharon Taylor was the GM and decided she was going to leave. And so Rogers had the station, and I moved over to Rogers with this, going from country to top 40. And they sort of threw me in. I had to be the interim program director. And I had to make goofy decisions. I remember standing in the hallway and someone had this big KISS 92.5 banner up on the wall and saying to me, do you approve of, you need to approve this? And I'm thinking, what do you mean? What do I need to approve? It's a big, sure, let's do it. And thinking about, the processing of how the station sounds doesn't sound right. And do you like the sound of it? So there's all these little things that, you have
under the hood.
Yeah, you just have to start making decisions, and you have to learn. And that sounds silly, like, oh, of course, that's an easy decision to make. But really being in leadership is about making decisions often. And you get into this habit of, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And they're relatively easy and harmless, okay, sure, let's play this song and let's not play that song. But where they're not harmless and where they hurt like hell is when it's about people.
Yes.
And that's the hard part, is having to make a decision about somebody that impacts their lives and their livelihoods and their families. And it's, I have many, and they're really, really hard, and they don't get easier. It continues to be difficult to think about, making a decision when something's not going well with someone. And the great news is when you can help them kind of come out the other side. And then the bad news is when you can't, and you have to make a change to the team. And that never gets easy. And so, I would say that those decisions still keep me up at night. The strategic decisions and let's shift here or shift there, you can kind of course correct along the way, but it's tough when you're making decisions about people.
Mm-hmm. I hear that for sure. So I remember at a Canadian Music Week, you were on a panel, and what sort of led me into this question was I have like a very vivid memory of you talking about a decision you made to, I think it was to fire someone, and how you learned from that tough decision. I would like to hear a little more about that.
Sure. Usually your greatest strength as a human is, your best attribute is also your Achilles heel. And so, one of the things that I think I've been, if you're doing a plus minus, if I'm doing self-awareness, I'd say I'm pretty good at making fast decisions. I don't kind of hum and haw over things, and I like to go fast, and I like to try things. And
you're in your position because you trust your gut.
Moving fast is, especially in this business, is critical. And I'd been programming KISS 92.5, where you make 100 decisions a day because it's top 40, and it's always, it's evolving. And then I moved over to CHFI to be the general manager and the program director. And it's a total 180. You don't make a lot of decisions, but the decisions you make need to be spot on. And it's not fast paced, and it's much more strategic. And I made the call to fire Aaron Davis, who was the Heritage morning show host. Dawn and Aaron had been doing mornings on CHFI, to huge success. And Dawn had retired, and Aaron was co-hosting the show. And I think, Aaron would say, everyone would say, like, it just wasn't going great. And, the research wasn't great. And, it just wasn't a perfect scenario. And so I made the call to cancel the show and move another show in. And it totally blew up. I mean, it couldn't have blown up in any more. The only saving grace was social media didn't exist.
Oh, God.
But, there were so many complaints, Sarah, that I would start every day with emptying my voicemail. And I'm a total believer in, if somebody phones you, you phone them back. If somebody emails you, you email them back. And that's just the way that goes. Mm-hmm. So I every day would start with all the phone messages, complaints. My voicemail would get full. Reception would they couldn't put any more calls through, so they'd have to take a list. I still have the list in the book somewhere when I want to remind myself of, the dumb things I've done, the dumb decisions I've made. I can go back and look at that, or I could just Google it. And it was just nonstop. And it was awful. And, every 3 days, some vice president would be in my office. I say this and they joke, like, how are things going now? And I'd be thinking, they're not much better. And it was a really tough time. And I wouldn't, other than the impact to the people, I wouldn't trade it for the world. I mean, it was awful. And, I went from having a bunch of wins to this major loss, financial. We lost, tons of ad revenue. The ratings were way down. Aaron ended up on a competitor station and, started kicking our butt. And it was like, I couldn't have lost any more, from a business standpoint. And so it was a great learning experience. It was not a fun time, but it was a wonderful learning experience. And I have so many lessons from that I think of everything I've done in my career. That one it still teaches me every day.
So what exactly is it that you walked away from with that? There's a few lessons there.
First of all, I think don't regret it is one. I'm not big on regrets. Listen, if you do something really horrible to someone, then that's a different story. But, take a swing, it doesn't work out, you can beat yourself up, and I wish I had of all over the place. But I don't think it's really helpful. And frankly, Erin leaving, caused her to find Mike Cooper, who was her best partner, and build that up. And then we went and hired them back, and it was amazing. And without her leaving, she wouldn't have had the opportunity to really prove to herself and to the world. She just left and kicked our butts, and then came back and kicked everyone's butts. And that was wonderful for her. She found Mike. So lesson one is, don't have regrets, just acknowledge it was a mistake, call it out, and then fix it. And I think the big thing is people are so afraid of saying they're wrong.
Oh, so much. Yeah.
Right? And you can witness it every day in these little, arguments that go on, or people hold it. They don't want to come out and say, hey, this is a train wreck. Holy, this is my bad. Totally my mistake. I'm putting my hand up and saying, I messed this up. Please help me fix it. Or here's how I'm going to fix it. So I think, no regrets, call out your mistakes when you make them. Don't be afraid of making mistakes, and don't be afraid of admitting to them. And then, put your ego aside. I think it would have been really easy for me and for everybody involved at Rogers to, not go back and, I called her and we went out for coffee, and I apologized and said that was like totally the wrong decision. And I made a mistake. That was a bad call. And, here's why I did it, and here's what I was thinking. And, it was the wrong call. And it would have been easy, I think, to not do that, maybe easier. It was a bit of it's a bit uncomfortable, I guess. It's not uncomfortable for me. I don't take it that seriously. I don't take myself that seriously, but I can understand why it's so uncomfortable to say that you made a mistake. But if you can own your mistakes, I think you have a way better shot at taking risks, which can have major rewards. It was a risk to call Erin. I remember people around me saying, what makes you think she's going to come back? Is she even going to take your call? I'm like, she'll totally take my call. She's an amazing person. And we didn't, there was no bad blood.
It was business. Yeah.
It was business. And so, that just sort of being able to recognize, oh, I took that swing. That was a really bad swing. And now I got to figure out how to take a different swing is so important I think in life and in business. And I don't beat myself up over it.
Yeah.
Move, onwards and off we go again.
There's a reason that story resonated with me, right? Like all the way back, I think it was like probably 5 or 6 years ago now when you were speaking about it. And that's because it's like how we've all made mistakes, right? That is a relatable thing that happens in every line of business, whether it's radio or not. And every media company, right, has accountability somewhere on a wall on their list of values. And yeah, taking ownership of what you've done, good and bad, is a really important part of all of this.
I think the other big lesson for me was I don't know how to say this, but the buzzword right now is authenticity, but I really did need to lean into being myself to solve the problem, because and I'll never forget when, we'd done the deal and Aaron was coming back. This is such a small thing, but it was a big thing for me. I used to write the, I don't know, daily or weekly CHFI e-blast that used to go out to the listeners. And it was a big database. And I always liked writing it, and I would just write a little personal thing or, whatever.
Creative writing.
And so I had to write the email to announce that Aaron was coming back. And I remember the VP of programming saying, "What are you going to say? I mean, like, what's the hook in this?" And, I just remember sort of sitting at my desk for days thinking, what am I going to say? Like, it was a contest, or it was like a gimmick, or it didn't really happen, or what do you do? And I'll never forget finally just saying, okay, well, what did happen? Oh, and I wrote the line, "Have you ever made a mistake at work?" Well, I did, and it was a big one. And from there, the rest just sort of came out, it was and it wasn't like, it just was a bad mistake, and it happened, and it shouldn't have. And guess what? Aaron's back. And I remember bringing it into the VP's office and saying, here's what I think. And he just sort of looked at it like, "Are you nuts? Do it." And that, when you can get comfortable in who you are, and it just makes it easier to tell people what's going on. And sometimes I think we try way too hard to sort of spin things, when really people are grown-ups. They understand. People know that, there's the wrong call is made, and you just own it and write it and talk about it the way that makes sense for you. It'll make your life a lot easier.
Sounds like you were acting as manager before all of this, and then after this, you were Julie the manager.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, it was a crazy time, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. Again, other than the people that were impacted, which I, will never feel good about. But otherwise, it was a great lesson.
I also can't imagine going through something like that with like all the men around you at the table. How has your experience been, climbing this ladder?
Listen, I have two thoughts on this. So my first thought is it's been amazing. Most of my mentors are men. The most of my bosses have been men, and most of senior management in the media industry have been men, and they've been wonderful. I mean, I've had and I've had some female programmers and managers as well, who are also great. And so I've had a really wonderful experience. And, my biggest mentor through my entire life is my dad. And I grew up in a family where, there's 6 kids, there's 5 girls, I'm the youngest, my brother's the oldest. And my parents really, and I'm not young, I'm 50. So, my dad was born in 1927 and my mom was born in 1933, and they've passed away. So that, we didn't grow up in this, we didn't grow up in the 2000s. Yeah. But I don't know, my parents, they just never really, they didn't push us to be, gender specific around our interests. So I loved sports. And I played sports all the time, and that was totally fine. And, I was often the only girl on the team, or I was the only girl that was playing sports at lunch. And that's what I wanted to do. And I sort of have always grown up with this attitude of having these blinders on. This is what I love. This is what I'm comfortable doing. I'm just going to do this. And sure, there were moments where, it can be uncomfortable, or you feel like, geez, I'm on an island here. But I tried to not really overthink it, and just, it's what I wanted to do, and off I went. I think, over the last, I'm going to say over the last decade, 5 years for sure, I really have started to appreciate how that's not the case for everyone. And how I needed to do a better job of advocating for, whether it's advancing women's careers, or having more diverse teams, or pushing forward our inclusion and our diversity, inclusion and diversity within this industry. I don't think I was deliberate enough about that because I really lived with these sort of blinders of like, well, of course women should do this. And of course, people of color should do this. And of course, LGBTQ2S plus people should do this. Like, of course, that's the right thing. And now over the last decade, I've really become more about being an advocate and being more deliberate about it, because the reality is, I had it good and most people don't. And I've been privileged.
Yeah. I heard you say one time, I don't remember if it was, at a conference or a panel or whatever it was, but at some point I heard you say something about like, we don't need like women's only panels and like things like that. And I remember being like, yeah, I would like to think about things that way too. And then I've also had a bit of a change of heart, I think, over the last, just where my work has brought me over the last 5 years, and advocating for those who maybe don't have the platform or the voice. So I think that's also changed for me. How are you implementing that in, your day to day? Like, I know you're on the Diversity and Inclusion Council at Rogers.
Yeah, I think, my problem with, just to talk a little bit about the women's only panels, is I always felt it was tokenism.
Agree.
Right. And I didn't want to be known as, the female program.
The go-to VP. Yeah.
Right. I just didn't want, I wanted to, you judge me if you think I'm good or bad, just judge me on that. But now I realize that those panels, or that voice, or that discussion. So it's not about having 5 women up on a panel to say you have 5 women on a panel talking about music. It's about making sure that we're having the conversation about why there aren't more women in leadership, or why there aren't more Black executives. That's the conversation we need to have. And so that's what I'm being more deliberate about. I have a few things that I'm doing. At Rogers, we have our program All In, where we've made a commitment to a variety of different initiatives, including, airtime and creative services for businesses or charities that are helping equity-seeking communities. We have mentorship programs. And I would say they've all been very impactful, but the hiring practices that we have adopted have, I think, really made it easier to, again, like, let's just call out what the problem is. Let's recognize there's not enough diversity in this industry, and certainly within senior leadership. And then let's have an open conversation about what we're going to do about it, and why we need to do something about it. And let's take ownership. I mean, I'm a white person. I have white privilege. That's the reality. So what are we going to do with that? So we've changed some of our hiring practices. And we have panel interviews now. I mean, these are some of the tactical things where we have diverse panels. So we don't just have, all of one type of person hiring for a position. There has to be diversity in that. And so there's a lot that we're doing there. I've also been participating. And one of the most rewarding things I've done in my career through the Canadian Black Chamber of Commerce, this Propel Mastermind program, which is, I'm one of the mentors, and really the people that I'm mentoring are mentors to me. It's for Black entrepreneurs that are starting up their businesses or trying to grow their businesses. And it's just been wonderful to be involved in that, and to see the work that is being done to help elevate those voices. So those are a few of the things, but it's not enough. I need to do more. And I think if you think you're doing enough, if you're in a position of power and you think you're doing enough, you're not, because none of us are doing enough, right? Until we solve all the problems, we're not doing enough.
Yeah, and like being in a position to hire, I really have found like that it's not as easy as just putting up a job posting. There are people that will never find those things from certain communities based on privilege, right? Like maybe they don't have internet half the time, but they're really talented, and they live somewhere where they just, they have to go into town to get wireless internet or whatever it may be. So I've been thinking about that a lot lately, and how we can change the way that we hire, as well as like introduce programs to prepare people who might not be ready, but are like very willing to learn.
Well, and when you think about, so much of the hiring that happens is through connections.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, even if it's not firsthand connection, it's through a peer group. And if you don't have connections into those communities, or those communities don't have connections in to the businesses, that is a disadvantage right there. I mean, that's a bias that we perhaps don't even recognize, that, this pool of people that we are hiring from, even if we don't know this person firsthand, if they're connected to other people that we know, well, now we're in a shallow pool potentially. Mm-hmm. So ensuring that we have that we broaden that pool and we broaden those connections into all communities is vital. And it takes work. It's not something you're going to just do. You can't do it well just by hoping it works out. You have to be very deliberate about it. And, there are real tactical things that you have to do in order to make sure that you have a candidate list that reflects the communities that we're serving. And if you don't, then you need to go out and figure out how to do it.
Yeah. An eye-opening conversation I had with a guest on this podcast, Erin Carroll. Maybe you've crossed paths. Erin is a publicist in Toronto with Cadence. Erin was talking about how a lot of people in the LGBTQ2+ community don't even feel comfortable to go to, like, say, a Canadian music conference, or can't afford to attend. So by having a specific conference catered to that audience, they might feel more comfortable, it might be more affordable, but there's still networking opportunities there that will introduce them to the rest of the pool. I'm trying myself as well to get involved in a little more of that stuff. So
you doing this podcast is amazing. And kudos to you.
Thank you.
And thank you for doing it. It's amazing leadership.
Well, thank you. And the biggest reason behind it all is, women have trouble celebrating, I think, their accomplishments. And I just wanted like an open place to talk about it and learn from mistakes. That's a big part of it too. And if a conversation between us two can help someone else, then hey, because you manage so many properties, right? TV and radio and podcast networks, the business has changed a lot since 1999, where we started our conversation. So this is going to be a loaded question, but if you could change anything about the business yourself right now, what would it be?
That is a loaded question. There are a few things. If I could wave a magic wand, I would convert all of the audiences that we have and all of the listening that happens. This is a very technical thing. I would convert it all to digital. So if suddenly everybody that listened to, X broadcast or watched X broadcast, if all of that could just magically be digital, that would be the thing to me that would be the most meaningful from a business point of view.
Data and metrics, is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, data. Suddenly we have data. Suddenly we can start doing personalization. Suddenly we can, we have this mass audience that we can now figure out, you like this, you don't like this. We suddenly can have more of a direct conversation.
Takes a few decisions out of private companies' hands that monitor how well our properties are doing.
So that would be one, I think. If I get another magic wand, and this builds off of the conversation that we just had, I would love to see more diversity in our business and diversity of skill set. where if we could bring in an incremental, I don't know, I'm going to pick a random number, 20%. So if I could add 20% more people into the business, all with, a completely different skill set, I would love to do that. And by different skill set, I mean like a digital first skill set. So if we could complement the incredible industry that we already have with, 20% more horsepower, I would love to do that. I would just love to have more humans, period. I think, people are the secret sauce to anything. And if we could just magically pull all of these digital first natives into the business, diversity of skill set, diversity of thought, diversity of culture, gender, etc., I think that would be wonderful. So those are, if I get 2 magic wands, those would be that. I mean, obviously there are regulatory challenges that we definitely need to sort out.
We would need a whole other podcast for that.
Yeah. But I'll go with that. You gave me a magic wand, one for each hand, and I think those would be my 2.
Cool. From an adaptation perspective, what's something that's changed since '99 that's been really hard for you to adapt to? Or took a big learning curve?
I think I don't know if this has been, it's, I'm very conscious of the fact that it's not 1999 anymore. And I have 2 kids. And so I watch their behavior every day, and learning how to know when to lean into your history and your heritage, and when to kind of run away from it, or if not run away from it, think about it differently. I still find that very difficult to do. This sort of, bias of, well, the way I grew up consuming media is not how people are consuming media today. Mm-hmm. And I think learning how to use different mental models to think about consumption changes and how to determine, is the way we're doing it now the right way to do it, or is it just because that's the way we've always done it? And it requires this sort of out-of-body experience every day. I don't know what I don't know, and I recognize that. I haven't worked at Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, and so I don't have that. I don't have 20 years of experience doing that. Mm-hmm. And so it's a learning curve to think about, how do we not forget all the amazing things that we've done and what's important from the past, but how do we make sure it doesn't, handcuff us? And I still really struggle with chasing shiny objects. I am, Clubhouse comes out and I want to be all over Clubhouse. And I love to chase shiny objects, and I love to do a lot of things. And I'm still learning how to prioritize. And I'm not great at it. I actually would say I'm probably, I don't know if I'm in my head, I'm bad at it. So I work really hard to overcompensate, because I want us to kind of go out and do everything, and I want to go out and experiment with everything. And it's been hard for me to learn that prioritization is key. And then I think the third thing is getting out of the weeds. I really love the business, and it's fun for me I would happily come down and sit around a music meeting, but that's not helpful to anyone. And I had to learn how to, and it's not because I want to micromanage things, it's just because it's fun. And I had to learn how to, get out of my team's way, and they have to figure that out. And that's not for me to figure out. And frankly, it's wrong so letting go of past jobs and past habits and, pushing yourself to think differently, especially when I've been at the same place. It'd be really different, I think, if, I picked up and went somewhere else, and I didn't, and even with television, I don't have a background in television. So it's been easier for me to not be in the weeds in TV because I don't know how to do those things.
Right.
Whereas, you grow up in radio and you've done every job there is to do. I have to have a conscious effort to get out of the way.
No, that's fair. Would that be almost like your management advice too? Get out of the way?
I think my number one piece of advice around management is hire great.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to hire great and don't settle. And I think, we are often in a rush to fill a role. And when you're in a rush to fill a role because X job needs to get done, you often don't hire the best person. And I think this is where the industry has struggled with diversity, is we don't take the time to explore many different options. We want to put somebody in the role quickly to get the workload done. And that's not the best. That is high. There's a saying, hire slowly, fire fast, hire slow. But I do think hiring great people, and sometimes you don't need to do that slowly. Sometimes, I always have a running list of people that I want to hire. Mm-hmm. And when there's an opportunity, and you can jump on something and there's a perfect fit there, amazing. But I do think you really have to hire well.
When you read the line in your own bio, Canada's first female vice president of programming, reflecting on the future and hiring great and these people that are going to come next, what does a young woman just getting into radio broadcasting, television, sports media, what does she need to know?
Do it. Just do it. You can do whatever you want. And don't let anybody tell you that you can't. And, just there's I say this to everyone, but especially to young women, you have to believe in yourself. And that doesn't mean being, arrogant or cocky or, not curious, because that's actually the worst thing you can do is not be curious. I mean, my second piece of management advice is stay curious. And we could talk about that. That is probably my biggest passion in life is curiosity. But I would just say to a young woman, just you can do it, just go. And whether it's sports or music or entertainment or running a company or finance or engineering or whatever, just go and do it. And if there's no one that looks like you doing it, don't let that stop you. Be the first.
Be the first female VP of programming. Did that psych you out when you got that title?
I'm not sure I really ever clued into it until somebody wrote the bio, I mean, honestly, I don't know that, I don't know. I don't think I don't spend a lot of time thinking about, myself. And again, I go back to, my first comment. I truly do think of myself as, still as the intern. And
probably why you've done so well. When you're talking to someone in a position of power and they are constantly reminding you that they're in a position of power, that doesn't go over well.
No, maybe not.
Full disclosure. That was the end of part 1 of my conversation with Julie Adam. Not even 24 hours later, Julie sends me a note asking if it was okay, asking if I needed more time with her, if we should jump on again. I found it so weird. Turns out she was withholding a little bit of information, something that she perhaps wasn't ready to discuss at the moment we first recorded. So let's pick it back up with Julie Adam. Here is part 2 of our conversation.
Well, thanks for having me back on again. And just out of the gate, I'm crazy for feedback, and I always want to make sure that I do a good job for people. So that is just my normal neurosis.
That's your norm. Okay.
Hey, was I okay? And can I do anything else? And but you're right. I probably was a little tentative as I was right in this place where I, wasn't really ready to talk about it, but I was close. So I've always wanted to write a book. There's just things you want to do. And for whatever reason, it's been something that I've always wanted to do. And I've, taken a few swings at it. I would start and I'd get going and it would, I wasn't happy with it. And I would, I wouldn't get very far. And so I'd throw it out and move on. And then, a few years later, I would try again and the same thing would happen. And then, I think we all have, we've talked about this sort of voice in our head, right? And how, we can talk ourselves out of doing anything, and we can be our own worst enemy and self-critic. And one day, I'm having this like typical sort of inner battle with myself. I'm out walking my dog on the trails and I do this thing, that I was always doing, like, oh, I really want to do this. And then my, inner jerk voice would be like, nobody's going to read it. And what are you going to write about? And, you have no credibility in this space. And for whatever reason, after the, 100th time I'd done that, I just thought to myself, who cares? Like, who cares if no one reads it? And who cares if it's not that good? And what does it matter? I'm not doing this to be, I'm not out to do this as a full-time job. And I sort of think about it like sports, hey, I took up tennis. I'm not a great tennis player. I'm never going, I'm not joining the tour, but I wanted to try. And yeah, I'm, even after many games and matches, I'm still kind of not that great at it.
If the podcast space has showed us anything too, it's that there is someone that wants to listen to just about every subject.
That's right. Everybody can find, and if nothing else, I have a big family. So, I'll get at least, 30 readers out of that.
Okay. So what was the premise of the book?
So the book it's called Imperfectly Kind. And it is, it's my thoughts on leadership, and really specifically, it's about how I think leaders should make kindness their superpower, and how I think kindness can really be the superpower you have and that you need to lead. And so often I think as people, and particularly as leaders, we aim for perfection. And I don't think perfection is something that you should strive for. It doesn't mean I don't think you should have a high bar and you shouldn't aim for greatness and you shouldn't compete to win. It's just that perfection I think it's impossible. The best athletes in the world and the best musicians, they're never perfect. So instead, I think we're better off if we aim for kindness. At least that's what, that's what I'm trying to do. Is, I hope at the end of all of this, people will say, yeah, she wasn't perfect, but you know what? She really tried to be kind. And when I think about what I want my boys, my two sons, to get out of me, is that, when all else fails, just try to be kind. Be kind to yourself. It really starts with yourself first. Be kind to others. Take care of people, take care of your friends, take care of your family, and take care of yourself. So that's what the book is about.
First of all, I'm so excited that you said it's about leadership, because I was hoping that it would be, because I selfishly would love to read a book written about leadership from you. But secondly, it relates to everything we talked about in part one so perfectly, because you've been on the receiving end of kindness from the stories you've told me, and like the kindness that you showed, someone that you had to show the door at one point.
Yeah, it is. Listen, you have to make really hard decisions. We've talked about this as a leader. There are hard, nasty decisions you have to make. As difficult as it is to make a decision, and let's call out what the worst decision is that we have to make. You have to let someone go. You impact their livelihood. That is the hardest decision. And I'm never going to be happy with that or get used to that. And if I could sign somewhere that said I never had to do that again, I'd sign over and over again. Yeah. But really, when I think about it, and to me, if I think about kindness, I have a responsibility as a leader to be kind to the business and the team. And so making that decision is the kind thing to do, because you have to take care of not just that one person, but the team, the business, the audience, whatever that is, whatever those surrounding parts or components are. And then the second piece is when you do make that decision, then it becomes all about how do you be kind to that person and how do you show them kindness and respect. And even though you had to make a decision that, obviously they don't like, and you're never going to make decisions that everybody likes, if you can help and give kindness and use kindness as your superpower throughout, it will make things better. It won't make them perfect, but it will make them better.
Mm-hmm. Just like athletes too. I think more and more now that people are starting to talk about how you can't be perfect, is how we're getting to this place when people are being kinder to themselves.
I think so. I hope so.
Okay. So where can people get the book? What's the situation? And did you voice your own audiobook?
That's funny. I haven't done an audiobook yet. So the book will be, I'm still, I'll be honest. I thought the hardest part was going to be writing the book. But as a self-publisher, and this has been so much fun. I mean, it's, I feel I feel sick to my stomach about the whole thing. And I can't believe I'm actually going to put this out into the universe. But when I get past that, it's been a really fun experiment. So it'll be available online for sure through Amazon. I'm going to try to get it into chapters into Indigo as a good Canadian. And online and bookstores and such.
And I know that you're going to have a couple of weeks of getting a few things organized. So thanks for talking about it so early on the podcast. But when you are ready, where can we find the information for how to get it?
So you can get it at julieadam.ca. I have a website there and all the info will be there, and hopefully it'll be out into the world soon. I was aiming for my birthday. My birthday's, I'm turning 51. And so my whole thing was, I got to get this out while I'm still 50. And so I'm definitely going to cheat. I'm in my head thinking, I don't think I'm going to hit my birthday target, but I am definitely going to figure out a way to put something out there that at least is like a coming soon that buys me a bit of time, but still achieves my goals. See, the rules to me are always bendable, right? There's always, you set a rule and then you can bend it a bit.
Well, I do think you should voice your own audiobook, but I know you know how I like to end the podcast. I've asked you to bring forward a couple names of women that you would love to hear tell their stories on this podcast.
Yeah, so I decided, I love how you end this, by the way, and I love your podcast, and you do such a wonderful job, and you're so amazing for our industry. And
thank you.
The work that you're doing is just incredible. So thank you for that, and thanks for having me on again. You should voice my audiobook. You're way better at this than I am.
Hey, I'll do it. You let me know.
Amazing. So I decided not to choose Rogers women because I could never narrow it down to 3. And there's so many incredible women that I work with at Rogers. So I decided to go outside of the
That's
Rogers.
very fair.
The Rogers sphere, if that's okay. I'm going to start with Emily Mills. And Emily is the founder of How She Hustles. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of that brand. It's been around for over 10 years. She's amazing. She's an entrepreneur. She's spent some time at CBC. She's won a ton of awards. And it's really a Toronto-based network that connects diverse women through social media and special events. So she founded that business, and she's incredible. You have to talk to Jen Walsh if you haven't already, from Apple. Jen is a proud Canadian and spent a lot of time at Apple Canada, and then, was promoted into the US and working at a Cupertino, and now is in the UK, although I'm not sure she actually ever made it to the UK because I think she was promoted during COVID, but just a wicked, smart, terrific leader and a super good human. And then a big shout out to Kristen Burke, who is the, new president of Warner Music. Kristen, who I've known for, many years through Universal Music, just a wonderful person and smart, so smart and such a great leader, and, is now the president of Warner Music. And do I get a bonus one?
Yeah, you do. Go for it.
Okay, good. So, I'm sure you know Ashley Potvin from E1 Music, who's VP, manager of lights and Arkells. Ashley to me I remember being at an Arkells concert, and I don't know if you've ever seen this. You've been to so many shows. I can't remember a time when an artist brought their manager on stage. just to thank them for being so amazing. They call Ash up to the stage and, Max basically says, the lead singer basically says, our manager here is like this, we wouldn't be here without her. And she's just so fearless and so creative and such positive energy. So a big shout out to Ash.
And she juggles a lot, right?
She juggles a lot. I don't think she sleeps.
Yeah, I hear that. I don't think a lot of women in this business sleep, but and how, like, I'm even thinking about how you wrote a book while doing, you had to take time off to do this. I know, when we were chatting, you were like, yeah, I'm working on a project. And
yeah, listen, here's my thing about time is you just do it and you just have to carve it out. I set some, pretty strict parameters. Obviously I have a day job that's, number one, and I have kids that's number two, but I was in lockdown, right? And, being in Toronto where we spent the better part of 2 years in lockdown. And that was really for me, that's when it all clicked was, I had this like little thing when I was out on a walk. I started this book, which I called This Book Will Fail, which got me into the head of like, I know this is going to be a disaster, but I'm going to get going. And then I quit again. And then, one day in the middle of COVID, and it was a time when I was really frustrated. I think we all had varying degrees of frustration and we hit walls, and I had hit this wall with COVID. And this email popped into my inbox from a newsletter that I subscribe to, Seth Godin, who's a really great business mind, marketer and writer. And he had started this course, or he has this learning platform. And there was this email from another Kristen Hatcher, who had started this course called Writing in Community. And you join, and you don't write, you don't share words with other people, but you all write together. And so it was at night and it was weekends, and I took some vacation time, and you just do it. Same as the podcast. I hear you. Right? Like, what else are you going to do? You're in lockdown. And so you just, you record this podcast over your lunch hour or after hours. And that's just what you have to do. We have the time. We just need to prioritize how we want to spend it.
Mm-hmm. And those are just a few of the wise words from Julie Adam that will continue in her book. So
thank you.
I can't wait to read it. I can't wait.
I appreciate that.
Well, thank you for trusting me to help break some of the news.
You're the first. You are the first.
Oh
I have not, publicly stated that this is happening. And, I felt like it's funny, you have good intuition, because after I kind of felt bad. Like I just did this whole podcast, and I'm kind of an open book, no pun intended. But I just wasn't ready to talk about it. And I don't know I can't quite remember how far into the process I was. And then I kind of felt bad. I'm like, oh, well, I feel bad. This podcast is going to come out, and maybe it'll come out at the same time as this book, and then that'll be weird. And so I thought, I'm just going to tell her. I trust Sarah. I'll tell her, and we'll go from there.
I signed the NDA. No, I'm kidding. But I'm telling you, though, I knew right away. I was like, I get what you're saying about like always wanting feedback, but of course you had great things to say on a podcast and an open sort of discussion. Of course you did. So thank you for part one, and thank you for part two. And because I gave you a bonus nomination, you'll sign the book before you send it to me when I purchase it.
Absolutely. That'll get you nothing in life. I would be my pleasure. I'm really grateful that you did this, and thank you so much. I'm my least favorite topic, but talking to you is always fun. Thank you.
Well, I found Julie Adam inspiring before I had even had a full, in-depth conversation with her. But now you understand why. You can find out more about Imperfectly Kind in the episode notes. I've got some links there where you can sign up for her mailing list and all of that. And whether you work in broadcasting or not, I truly believe that she has some fantastic lessons to offer up as a leader. Thank you so much for listening.
Hi, I'm Matt Kundle, host of the Sound Off Podcast, the podcast about broadcast. Every week since 2016, we've been bringing on broadcast leaders to talk about their experiences in radio, what they've seen, and where they believe it is all going. If you live and love radio, subscribe to the Sound Off Podcast with Matt Kundle wherever you get your podcasts.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.